So welcome again, everyone. I'm Jace Marino. We've been talking about your Microsoft Teams application journeys through this 5-part series. And so what we talked about to this point are what are Teams applications, where to find them, how to use them and why they're valuable, how to manage them as the admin, and a bunch of information around security and compliance for these applications. And now we've got Trent Hazy back with us from Teams Engineering. Today, we're going to talk about, at this point, you probably have an idea of which applications you want to allow or block within your organization. Now, how do you implement those application controls? Trent, can you even if anyone watched the previous video, give us a little background of you and your role, man. You've been instrumental to this whole process from Teams Engineering over your past 18 months you've been in the role.
Yeah, thanks, Jace. So I've been with Teams Engineering for about 18 months, and I'm leading the growth and adoption of our third-party apps in the ecosystem. It's always good to chat with you, Jace. I think you bring a dose of reality, like, what is a customer actually thinking and feeling? And this, I think, is a perfect topic for us to cover, because I don't want Teams apps to be a free-for-all. Like, I actually want to have some control over what people are using. So
sure. Well, so let's start with that. Appreciate the kind words, dude. Always a pleasure having you as well. So which Teams apps are available to which users? What's the best place to get started if I'm an admin to make sure that you've got some control over that?
Yeah, let me show you. I've actually got a admin center open here, and we can actually walk through it. So nice. In the admin center, if you go over to the Teams apps section, you'll see that there's actually 3 pages, and there can be some confusion around this because they're all different controls related to apps in Teams. Let's start with this first one, Manage Apps. Think of this as the full catalog of what's available in your tenant. It's going to show third-party apps, Microsoft apps, and even custom apps if you've uploaded them or your developers have uploaded them. So this is a great view. Anytime you're allowing or blocking here, it actually applies to all users. And there's a couple reasons why this can be dangerous and kind of like overkill. If I was really concerned about Zoho CRM, for example, and I knew I never wanted anyone to use it, go ahead and block it in this page. But the second I do that, I will never be able to unblock it for anyone, including the IT team. So if I wanted to test it myself and see if we might want to allow it in the future, I'm stuck because I used this kind of catch-all in the Manage Apps page. We call these app settings, which are different than policies. So anyways, that's just some commentary on this list. Allowing or blocking at the individual app level, it applies to everyone. There's one more app setting here, which is if I click on this big purple button up at the top, it opens this, and I can actually turn third-party apps off entirely or turn custom apps off entirely. I would generally advise against that, given there are about 800 apps in the store, and a lot of them provide these really small actions that just make my work more efficient. And so you want to leave your users the opportunity to gain that efficiency, whether it's a poll or a stand-up meeting or something quick that just gets my work going faster.
If I may, because we've touched on this kind of in every video, but if you're watching this video for the first time and you haven't seen other ones we've recorded, watch the first or the second video, because it'll explain a little more and show you examples of what Trent just talked about. And this isn't about creating, correct me if you feel differently, Trent, but it's not about creating more noise or having issues with support. It's about allowing people to leverage the tools they already have to do things they've never done in a lot of cases. And that's why we love this business. That's why it's been so much fun, because you'll see that Teams apps can follow you across the canvas. And in a lot of cases, they'll become more valuable inside of Teams than they were outside of Teams because of what you've all done in engineering.
It's a great point. And having options makes everyone's life easier. Like, there are things that our team uses that I think no other team uses in the company, but because we've been given the option to discover it and use what works for us, we're happy. So I know it's a delicate balance, but that's the Manage Apps page. So let's talk a little bit. Jace, you asked about how do I control what apps are available to individuals or groups of users. So this is a better way to enable or block, and it's called a permission policy. You start off with a global org-wide policy. And so let's actually go into that. I'll click on this org-wide. There are 3 tiers of apps that I can control: Microsoft, third party, and custom. And within each one, I can get a drop down like this, and I can allow all, block all, allow specific, or block specific. So I can basically build up a list of which apps I want to enable or block, or do it all in one direction or the other within these categories. So let me give you an example of a permission policy. This one I made is for a sales team, and you can see that I'm allowing all Microsoft apps and all custom apps, but I chose to only allow 4 specific third-party apps. These are ones that I have licenses for and I know my sales team is using regularly, but I'm going to block everything else. And what this does is it gives me the chance to allow specific apps to a whole department. And a permission policy was the perfect way to do this, because if I used app settings, it would apply to everyone, but a policy can be applied to specific individuals or a group. All right, so let me explain what's going on here. I actually created an IT admin test policy. And the reason this is awesome is I added 3 people to it: Megan, Alex, and Christy. Those 3 people actually have access to everything, which is different than what the rest of the org has in the global policy. But because I'm using a permission policy, the IT team can actually test and validate apps before they get rolled out org-wide. So this is a best practice I've learned working with a lot of our customers, is to give the IT team a sandbox to play in using permission policies. And that's on that topic, yeah, it works really well. So here's the precedence of what actually works. If you do anything in org-wide app settings, that takes the highest precedence. Then a custom permission policy, just like the one I showed you, like a custom IT policy, is a great idea so that you have that sandbox. And then lastly is the default permission policy. So this is kind of how things kind of propagate to the user, so to speak.
That's so helpful. So at this point, we know how would we make which applications available to which users. Just so, because we get this question a lot, so it's very much a leading question, but a lot of admins then want to understand, how do we make sure that folks are actually going to use these applications that they're making available and that their time is worth the effort? So how do we make them more visible, discoverable, and easier to use inside of the Teams canvas?
Yeah, that's why we have setup policies. So let me go straight there. Setup policies allow you to either pre-install or pin apps. I'm going to focus on pinning. Pre-installing is really simple. If you choose to pre-install an app for specific users or org-wide, that app will be pre-installed and available in the flyout, which is that little ellipses on the left rail of Teams. But pinning is a great idea because it pre-installs it and makes it more visible. So here's what I did in this global setup policy is I brought the ServiceNow virtual agent in here right after files, and this is how it shows up. And so for something that I know my entire organization uses, ServiceNow, this is like a no-brainer for me, just making it more visible for everyone so that they can make the most of an app they probably use semi-regularly.
That's awesome. I mean, we've seen so many examples of this, and just for folks watching, huge value with the apps people are already using. We've seen a lot of organizations take their internal training sites as they're rolling out Teams and pin them on the rail. And then, of course, that evolves over time. It's just been such a valuable place to throw things.
Yeah, an intranet portal can be a great first place to start if it's kind of centralized information for the entire org. Like, absolutely get that up in the left rail using a setup policy. So here's what it looks like on web and mobile. To test it out, you can even create a custom policy just for yourself. And here are a couple of frequently asked questions. It takes a couple hours for a policy to propagate because it's going through every app and every user. So it takes a little bit of time. You can apply policies to groups, but that's not possible in the Admin Center UI. You have to use PowerShell to do that in bulk. And then how many apps can be pinned? Up to you. You can do an infinite amount, but usually only 11 or 12 show up in an average screen size. So don't go too crazy with those. Jace, if you have a second, the last thing I wanted to show was just how to see what people are using after you've done all this. Like, it's probably important to know, like, how did my users respond once I enabled or blocked things?
The fruits of your labor.
Exactly. Go to usage reports and you'll see this. I can see third-party and Microsoft apps today. Shortly, we'll have line of business or custom apps in this chart as well. But it gives me an idea of what people are actually using and where that demand is. So I figured this would close the loop for everyone.
Trent, we're in your debt, dude. So awesome to have you on here. Hopefully this helps a lot of folks with the questions that they're having around the globe, which we get these ones quite often. But thank you so much for your time and appreciate you walking folks through this.
Absolutely.